This week's Torah portion is the portion of Lech Lecha. God tells Avraham, Lech Lecha, me'artzecha, me'ladtecha, be'sevicha, el ha'aretz asher areka. God tells Avraham to leave your home. And then he says, number one, you shall leave your land. Number two, leave your birthplace. Number three, leave your father's home. And you are to go to the land that I will show you. 5 details here. Why all these details? Furthermore, when a person leaves his country and he travels to another country, usually you first leave your house, then you leave your community, then you leave your city, then you leave your country. And here in the Torah it seems to be the opposite. God says, leave your artzecha, leave your country. Then leave your community, meladtecha. Then leave your house. And go to the land where I will show you. So why this setup? Why this order? Furthermore, God tells Avraham, what does he tell him? Lech Lecha, go to you. That doesn't make sense. He should have simply said, Lech, go, journey, move, start going. I'll tell you where to go. Why the double terminology, Lech Lecha, go to you? It really makes no sense. I'm not going to me. I'm leaving the place where I live. I'm going to you. So it's not to me that I'm going. Rather, I'm coming to you. So why Lech Lecha, the double terminology here, to travel? The answer to all of these questions is as follows. Pertaining going and traveling, every Jew, every person is considered to be a traveler. Each one of us is constantly moving, in contrast to the angels that are considered to be static. They are in one place. But we are movers and shakers. We are trailblazers. We are constantly moving. But we move in 2 directions. We move in 2 motifs. One is downward and one is upward. In other words, one is we started from above, we come down below, and one is that we started below and we go above. And these 2 journeys, these 2 different types of travels, these 2 different motifs are actually in the Parsha, and we just read it. Avraham Avinu is now in Israel, considered to be the highest place in the world. And he's now told to go down to Egypt. Now, there are those commentators who say it was a sin. Avraham Avinu should not have gone down because God just told him to come to Israel. And now that there is a terrible famine, so stay there and work it out. But yet, from Rashi, it seems that it was a positive thing. There was a famine. Avraham Avinu was a good father, who was going to be a father. He was a good husband. He was a provider. And he felt responsibility to go and to acquire food. So he goes down to Egypt. He now goes down to Egypt. He puts Sarah into a box, into a suitcase, and he puts her there so that the Egyptians should not find her or see her because she was so beautiful. And eventually they take her to the house of Pharaoh. Pharaoh now wants to marry her, and God punishes the entire house of Pharaoh. The entire house of Pharaoh is plagued. He realizes that Sarah is a married woman. And so Avram now is giving gifts because of Sarah. Tremendous gifts, tremendous wealth. And now Avram goes back up. And as the Torah says, he is now koved ma'oid b'mikna b'chesav v'zav. He has tremendous wealth and cattle and silver and gold, and the load was literally tremendous. And now he has to travel with this amazing, heavy, difficult, challenging load back to the land of Israel. We see from this many, many concepts. Number one is every descent is for a greater ascent. Every time God gives us a challenge in the world, every time we go through a struggle, every time we go through a hardship, every time we go through a sickness, it didn't happen by mistake. It didn't happen by chance. It wasn't random. Rather, this was part of God's plan for you. And even though for a moment, for a short while, you feel that you're having the descent, you're going down, you have to realize that every time we are going down, it is for one purpose, that we should go higher than before. The rebound has to be not only as good as before, much better than before. When people tell me they have to redo their house, or they have to redo this, I said it has to be better than before. If you had a flood and now you're redoing your house, you read the tzarech aliyah. You went down to go up. Not to have the same thing you had before, it has to be much better. Everything in life has to be much better than before. Every descent, God gave you that descent because He wants you to have a greater ascent. He gave you that challenge, He wants you to be much better than before. So that's the first very important lesson. Lech Lecha implies two journeys, the journey of going down and the journey of going up. And the journey going up must always be higher and better, qualitatively and quantitatively than before. That's number one. Number two, Avraham Avinu tells his wife, you should know that I will become rich because of you. The Gemara tells us from this a lesson for all generations. And this is primarily a message to all the men. And that is the wealth and the blessings in the home is in the merit of the wife. And this started with Sarah, and it continues in every household. And therefore says the Gemara, Kabdu es nishasechem kedei setishashru. So the Gemara, the Alter Rebbe brings it down in Shulchan Aruch, that we have an obligation, honor your wife in order so that you shall be rich. The secret of becoming rich is to honor one's wife. So this is a story in the Torah. Stories in the Torah are not simply history, but it's halacha. It's a way we are to travel. It's the way we are to live our life. It's a lech lecha. God is telling us how we should live our daily life and how we should journey. So this is the general lech lecha. The two journeys going down, the second journey going up. These two motifs. But being that the Torah says Lech Lecha in one verse, therefore we must say that these two travels are not only independent travels that take place at different times, but rather the novelty and the chidush of this pasuk is that these two travels are actually simultaneously, and they can take place at the same time. You don't have to wait to go up only if you go down, and you don't have to wait when you're going down to go up. Now, what does that mean? There are two basic journeys. And these are two basic journeys of the soul. And we start with Avram. Who is Avram? Avram, his name means something. Every name in Judaism etymologically represents the combination of the soul's descent into the body, the combination of the life force in the body, and its association with the body. So what does Avram mean? Avram means Avram. Av is intellect. Ram means exalted. And Av also means father. He was an exalted father with tremendous intellect. Our sages tell us that Avram Avinu was a brilliant, brilliant scholar. He was a giant in science, in all of the knowledges and the philosophies that existed in the world at that time. And in addition to that, Avram Avinu was a giant in his kindness, so much so that it's brought down in Kabbalah, that the attribute of chesed, the attribute of kindness, told God, you don't need me. Avram Avinu is doing all the kindness throughout the entire world. So Avram was a giant. He was Avram, exalted. And this greatness is nelam mikorayim, means that the human mind could not comprehend and grasp the magnitude of Avraham's greatness. Yet, this great soul of Avraham Avinu travels from the highest world of Atzilus, down to Bria, down to Yetzirah, down to Asiya, down to the four worlds, and comes out into this world. This is hinted in the wording of the parsha. And that is why the wording is reversed. And this is not only for Avraham, but rather each one of us that possesses a godly soul. And that is, you should know that every soul travels, Lech Lecha, from where? Ma'artzecha, from your land. Your land etymologically means your will, Ratzain. The Ratzain, the will of every person, the will of every Jew, the will of every human being is to be connected to God. Because the soul is one with God. The soul is totally spiritual and godly. And at that moment, before the soul descends, it is one with God. It wants to only stay together with God. So, but the soul has to go down. It has to travel. It goes mi'artzecha, from its will. And it travels down to the lower level of meladetecha, which is your birthplace. And that represents intellect and understanding. Father and mother, Kabbalistically means intellect and understanding. Father is intellect, mother is understanding. Chachma bina. You have to travel from this desire to be one with God, from your intellect to Beis Avicha, your father's home, represents your emotions. Ela Aretz, and you have to come down to this world, Ela Aretz, to a place that I will show you, says God. The word Eretz, land, also means Ratzoin, also means will. And you have to leave your will, which is to be one with God, and to come down to this world to do God's will. And what does the word Eretz mean? It means, number one, to run, and number two, to do the will. In other words, to do God's will by running to do it. In other words, Ava with love and with joy. When you're joyous, you're quick, you're swift, there's alacrity. When you're upset, when you're angry, when you're mad, when you're sad, it's sluggish. It moves very, very slow. You have to do a mitzvah with joy, with alacrity, with power, with energy, that you're alive, that you want to do it. Not that someone is killing you or that you're dead. On the contrary, you're excited to do this. You feel it's an honor, it's a privilege. So it's a journey, because I was there with God, I was up there in heaven, and now I'm down here in this dark, cold world. Yet, this is the mission. This is the journey, to do God's will with love and with joy. And by doing this, Asher Areka, God says, I will show you. I will show you by doing this. Your soul will reach a much higher place. I will show you by doing this. You will live a much richer life. I will show you by doing this. You will be a happier person. I will show you by doing this. You will be much more productive. So this is the first journey, going down. The second journey is going up. It's at the same time, simultaneously. And what is that? At the beginning of the Parsha, God tells Avraham to journey. From where? From Charan. What does Charan mean? Charan etymologically means Charoin af shel ha'olam, the wrath of the world. Avraham Avinu was in a place of wrath, a place of anger, a place of disease, of epidemic, of pandemics, of darkness, thievery, deception. That was the world that Avraham Avinu was living in. God says, I want you to leave that world. It's interesting to note that in the previous parsha, the last word is Charan, which means wrath. And according to Rashi, the nun is upside down, to show that the world was upside down. It was an upside down world. God says, I want you to leave that world. And therefore, again, now we're journeying up. We're going from down, from Charan, we're going up. How do you do this? You have to leave Artzecha. You have to leave your will. Unfortunately, most of us, living in a world of darkness, of wrath, of COVID, we are in a state of darkness. And it's very difficult to change. It's very difficult, even though we know we have to change. That first step is the most difficult. And therefore God says, leave your will. You want to stay there. You don't want to leave. You need to leave that place. And it's hard, and it's difficult, and it's challenging, and it's hurtful, but you have to do it. They tell a story that a circus was once looking for a new act. And different people came, and they tried out the different act. One person came and said, I want to show you something. You never saw this act in your life. You're going to go crazy over it. What are you going to do? Prepare for me a 50-foot ladder. Okay, they prepare a 50-foot ladder. He says, now I want you to take a bucket of water, 24 inches wide and 3 feet deep. I'm going to show you a miracle. Wow, what are you going to do? He climbs up the ladder, puts his hands together, he dives off the ladder all the way into the bucket, splash. The water splashes all over the place, and he stands up, totally perfect, no scratches, no blemishes, all the bones are intact. The owner of the circus is going crazy. He never saw such an amazing act in his life. He says, that was beautiful. I want it. I'll pay you anything that you want to. He says, no, I don't want any money for this. No, I want to pay you. I want you to do this. We'll give you $100,000 a year. No, I'm not going to do it. I'll give you $200,000 a year. Nope. I'll give you $300,000 a year. Nope. I'll give you $1 million a year for the act. It's my final offer. He says, I'm sorry, sir. I'm not going to do it. He says, why not? I'll tell you why. It's the first time I ever did it, and I don't like it. So sometimes the first time is the most difficult. It's challenging. It's scary. But God says you have to do it. Light those Shabbos candles. You never did it before. Eat the kosher. Make the kiddush. Eat the matzah. Put on the tefillin. I know it's hard. I know you never did it. I know you feel crazy. You feel odd, like an oddball doing these things. It doesn't matter. Artzucha. Leave your will. Number one. Number two. Belatucha. You have to leave your intellect. Even though we understand everything and we know everything, you also have to leave your habits. Even though they're good habits. But if they're your habits that you're used to doing, not because you cognitively, with mindfulness, decided and chose to do this, but simply because that's the way you're used to doing things, then it's not productive. It's not godly. It's personal. It's selfish. You have to leave your habits. Beis Avicha, you leave your father's home, your intellect. And El Haaretz, you're going down even further to the land, to this physical world, which are negative actions. You have to leave all these things. And you have to go to the place, Areka, that God says, I will show you. Now this concept of leaving your will, leaving your habits, leaving your intellect, leaving your bad actions behind, this is really an answer to another question. And that is, how come God revealed himself to Avraham when Avraham Avinu was 75 years old? Right. What happened for the first 75 years of Avraham Avinu's life? Now the Medrash has many stories. Stories galore about Avraham Avinu's heroic acts. Yet, God does not reveal himself to Avraham until he's 75 years old. At the age of 3, Avraham Avinu already acknowledged God. At the age of 40, he was debating the greatest kings, professors, and scientists in the world. He was doing acts of goodness and kindness. Avraham and Sarah had tents open from all sides, giving charity and food packages to everybody, visiting the homeless. And yet God does not visit himself to Avraham. When does God reveal himself to Avraham? When he tells Avraham to leave. Then, all of a sudden he appears. To move? What's the big deal? People move all the time. As we know, throughout the last few months, people moved from New York to Florida, from France to Israel. People made a lot of moves. Yet God doesn't reveal himself to them. All of a sudden, God says, move from Haran to Eretz Yisrael. God feels that this deserves a personal audience, a revelation. And the answer is, Avraham Avinu was a good person. He was a godly person. He was doing God's work. He believed in monotheism. He was spreading that throughout the entire world. But he did it based on his own understanding, on his own estimation. his own desire. God says, that's not my servant. If you want to be my servant, if you want to be called the first Jew, then you have to do what I tell you. Even though up until now you did amazing things, that was your desires. You wanted to prove there was a God. You wanted to be nice to people. Now start doing what I tell you to do. Then I know that Avraham Avinu is my beloved. Then I know you are my servant. Now I know you fear God. Now I know that you are Avram, who is Echad Haya Avram. You are truly the one and only. So this is why Avraham Avinu, only at the age of 75, when God tells him to leave everything behind, all your accomplishments, and do it because of me, not because of you anymore. This is the transformation. This is the paradigm shift. This is what takes place in this parsha over the previous parsha. And this is the lesson to all of us, that on one hand, the soul every day is coming down. You get up in the morning, the soul comes back down. It's a big journey. At the same time, the soul has to go back up. We have to do mitzvahs. We got to do good deeds. And in truth, these two motifs of going down and going up can also be compared to positive commandments and negative commandments. When we do a negative commandment, we are removing ourselves from the world. When we're doing a positive commandment, we are bringing godliness down into the world. And they can be done simultaneously. And the power for us to be able to do these two acts at the same time, going up and going down, and yet have the capacity to live in an everyday, normal world, is because God, when He gave us the commandments, He put the two first commandments together. He said, on one hand, I am God your Lord, which is the introduction to all the positive commandments. And He said, do not have any other gods before you. Now these were two separate commandments. As we know, the Talmud says, how do we know that there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah? How do you know? Because, says the Gemara, the word Torah itself equals 611. And the first and second commandment, God said and spoke at Sinai. So you have 612, 613. So now I know there are 613 mitzvahs. The other 8 went through the vocal cords of Moshe. Now, on one hand, Anochi, I am God your Lord, V'lo yeh lecha, don't have any other gods, are two separate commandments. Yet God says it together in one voice. Something that no human being can do. Similarly, when it came to keeping the Shabbos, He says, Zochar, remember the Shabbos. Which means do the positive commandments, make Kiddush, make Havdalah, light the Shabbos candles, eat gefilte fish. And then He says, Shomer, protect the Shabbos. Don't violate the Shabbos. Don't turn the lights on, don't cook, don't drive, etc., etc. So these two things were said at the same time. Now, the Alter Rebbe says that the source for all the positive commandments is, I am God your Lord. If you love me, and you care about me, do what I want. So these are the 248 positive commandments. Lo yeh lecha, don't serve other gods. This is the source for all the 365 negative commandments. If you don't want to hurt me and hurt my feelings, then don't violate these commandments. And there are many mitzvahs that you have a positive commandment and a negative commandment together. So when you're keeping Shabbos, you're doing both, positive and negative. You're going up and you're going down. Two journeys. Lech Lecha. Furthermore, when you're eating kosher, you're doing two commandments. You're eating kosher, a positive commandment, and you're not eating non-kosher. Again, you're going up and you're going down. You have these double journeys. So this is the power and this is the blessing of this week's Torah portion. That Lech Lecha, that every human being, number one, has to know you go down to go up, but more than that, we can go up and down at the same time, simultaneously. It's not a contradiction. And this is the blessing that God gives us. This is the empowerment that the Parsha gives us. And this is what is truly expected of us throughout the rest of the year, now that we come out of the holidays. Today, interestingly, is Zayin Cheshvan, the 7th day of Cheshvan. What happened in Zayin Cheshvan? What's so special about today? We are told in the Talmud that the Jews used to come up to the Holy Temple to pray the entire month of Tishrei for the holidays, and then they would travel back home to their houses, to their farms, to their businesses. And on Zayin Cheshvan today was the final day that the final Jew finally came to his final destination. And because of that, the entire Jewish people held back, requesting rain to fall upon the world, because they didn't want that one Jew to get trapped in the rain. But besides that this expresses our Avas Yisrael, our love and our concern for every single Jew and every person, it also tells us something else, that till today we were still within the ambiance of the holidays, of Simchas Torah, of the joy of Simchas Torah, of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the awe. Today onward is a new year. We're back in the everyday business world. The secret of this week's Parsha is Lech Lecha, to unite both of these journeys, the journey up to the Holy Temple and the journey down from the Holy Temple, to unify the spirituality and to unify the physicality, to unify holiness and to unify the mundane. It's two different journeys, two different directions, but yet we have that capacity to unify them as one. I would like to conclude with one final story. The Rebbe of Belz, Rabbi Shalom of Belz, a great holy tzaddik, a miracle worker, a mystic. On the night of Shlichot, when you begin to recite the prayers of penitence, instead of going to the synagogue where the entire community was waiting for him, he went into his horse and buggy and told the driver, go into the forest. He went into the forest and there was a small hut there. He told the driver, stop. He gets out of the wagon, he goes to the hut, he looks into the window, and there's a man there sitting at a table, alone, just one person. And there are 2 cups, one in front of him and one in front of nobody. And there's a bottle of vodka on the table. He sees the man filling up his cup and the other cup, and he drinks his cup, l'chaim. And then he takes the other cup and drinks that l'chaim too. He fills up another cup. He says a few words, says l'chaim, drinks his cup and the other cup. He fills up a 3rd time, his cup and the other cup, l'chaim, his cup and the other cup. The Rebbe of Belz is looking through the window. He sees this. After this event, he turns around, gets back into the chariot and goes back to the shul. The entire community of thousands of chassidim are waiting for him to start slichus. He now enters into the shul, and boom, with the thunder, they begin the recital of slichos. At the end of the prayer services, the Rebbe of Belz turns to his assistant and says, look, there was a man who came into the synagogue in the middle of slichot. He's probably going to be there until everybody leaves because he started later. But after he finishes his slichot, tell him I want to see him in my house. Okay, half an hour after the Rebbe arrived home, Zelig knocks on the door. Zelig comes in and says, Rebbe, you requested to see me? He says, yes, I did. Please sit down. He says, Rebbe, what can I do for you? He says, look, I have a question to ask you. This evening, before Slichot, what did you do? Oh, nothing really. He says, really? Well, I saw you taking a cup of l'chaim and saying a few words. You drank it, then you drank someone else's cup. You did it 3 times. What's going on? He says, Rebbe, you saw that? He says, yes, I did. He says, well, I'll tell you what happened. He says, you know, Nebuch, I lost my wife, and I Nebuch lost all my money, and I had 1 cow, still giving me some milk. And my cow got sick. And I told God, God, you could fix it. For you to fix a cow is nothing. You run the whole world. You recreate every moment new of the world. My cow is not a big deal. I need a little cow. And you know what happened? I said, God, I'm telling you, I'm making a deal with you. If my cow dies, you should know I'm not going to shul anymore. I'm stopping to go to the synagogue. And even after that threat, my cow died. I stopped going to shul. And then my chickens who were laying the eggs, they got sick. I said, God, if the chicken dies, I'm not putting on tefillin anymore. And you know what happened? The chicken died. I stopped putting on tefillin. And then I told God, you know, I have a goat. And the goat also gives milk. If the goat dies, I'm stopping to eat kosher. You know what happened? The goat died. I stopped eating kosher. And then I said to myself, after a few weeks, you know, tonight is Slichus, and the whole community comes to daven together with the Rebbe. How can I not go to the Rebbe and daven Slichus together with my Rebbe? On the other hand, I'm angry at God. I can't just go to the shul. What about, you know, the cow and the chicken and the goat? So the Belzer Rebbe said, no, so what'd you do? So I'll tell you what I did. I remembered that a number of years ago I had a fight with the butcher. I didn't talk to the butcher for a while. Then I went to the butcher. I said, look, let's make up. Come to my house. I'll take out a bottle of vodka. We'll say a few l'chaims and make up. And that's what happened. He came to my house. I pulled out a bottle of vodka. I gave him a drink. I had a drink. We said a few l'chaims. After 3 l'chaims, we got up. We danced around the table. And we said, let bygones be bygones. And we hugged and we kissed. And now we're the best of friends. And I said, we'll do the same thing with God. I sat down on the table. I put down a cup for me. I put down a cup for God. I said, God, look, let's say l'chaim. I said l'chaim, let's bygones be bygones. I drank, and I was waiting for him to drink, but he didn't drink it, so I drank his. Then I made another cup for him. I said, let's drink l'chaim. I drank mine. I was waiting for him. He didn't drink his. I drank his again. And then I did it a third time. And after I drank 3 l'chaims, I got up from the table. I danced around the table. I said, God, I forgive you. I love you. And I showed up in shul. My dear friends, it's a new year. We had great expectations. We demanded a lot of God. And there's no doubt God is going to fulfill all our dreams and our prayers. Sometimes God is a bit late. He's not on time. And He doesn't do things when we want it to happen. But it's time we say l'chaim. It's time we say Lech Lecha. We're going to move on. We know everything that happens is for the best. And we know that we have the strength to truly ascend higher and higher than ever before. So being that we have new energy this year, a new blessing this year, a year of Tavshin Pei Beis, which means Plois Bakoil, that God will show us wonders in everything that we do. We should open our eyes and see the wonders and have the strength to do more mitzvahs and more Torah and more charity and more good deeds and to see a world of peace and harmony. As the Torah says, Asher Areka, God says, and I will show you the land of Israel with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.